happy Thursday. I'm getting ready to head to a super cool event. We're essentially making zines related to women's health, specifically perimenopause, and romance novels. So I'm super excited for it. And the event is being put on by researchers, and they're essentially looking into how health communication can take various forms, essentially. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm super excited. And I did email back and forth with the researchers a little bit, and they're excited to chat with me. We're going to schedule a chat sometime soon. And they also mentioned something to me about Barbies. So I don't know what's going on. This is going to be like a super crafty, fun event. And so we'll see how it goes. To sum up, the event was put on by researchers from UNC Charlotte, and it was about 2 hours long. They had sample zines for us to look at and get some inspiration, and they also had vendors focused on women's health and nutrition and perimenopause. There was also a table from the Charlotte-based Trope Bookshop, which is a romance bookstore, and of course I had to go to that table. Before we started our zines, there was a presentation on the history of zines, which actually started in the Harlem Renaissance, which I didn't know. And the person you see on screen is Bethany, who you'll hear more from later. Then we all worked in groups to make zines about self-empowerment and perimenopause, and it turns out that the Barbie buffet I was told about was so we could make Polaroids to include in our zines, which was super fun. Here's them doing some fun poses. And here is our final product. It's the day after the event. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot like being in art class again, which I really enjoyed. I think I definitely learned a lot from the people that I was with at the event, just kind of hearing about their experiences. And on top of that, the actual educational component. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed it. And we're going to do like a what's in my bag type situation. So I brought home the sample zines that they gave out. Like there's quite a few of them. They're really cool. And basically what happened is that people make the zines and then they sort of like digitize it and then they send it out by email so people can access it. And that's what's happening with the zine that my group made yesterday. They collected all our email addresses and they're going to send us the digitized version. And then, of course, basically one person in the group will get to take it home. And so here's some of the zines. I think they're really cool. This one has like the symptoms of perimenopause in it, which is really cool. And then one of these has like a QR code for resources, which is this one. They have a QR code. And then, of course, I went to the bookshop section. I did get books. So got Full Bloom by Francesca Saratella. I think that's how I pronounce it. And so this is basically a woman gets a perfume that makes her like really attractive to other people. And I thought the concept was so fascinating. So got that. And then I also got Thighs Wide Shut, which I've been hearing about this for a while. And the concept is basically a woman living with vaginismus, which is a pelvic condition, kind of navigates dating, navigates life, etc. And so I'm really looking forward to reading this one. And so apart from that, I really enjoyed the event. Another thing that was mentioned was that the Wellcome Library, which is like a medical library, wants to sort of archive the zines as an example of like what people are thinking and learning and feeling about perimenopause, and also just the broader idea of archiving health information and how people share that. So yeah, that's super cool. And hopefully our zine that we made will be in the library. Now, sometime next week, I'm going to talk with Bethany and one of the other researchers on the team, Maggie, to learn more about their research project and why they chose to do this. So I'm really looking forward to that. And so I will see you guys there. Hi, thank you so much for joining me. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Do you want to start by giving an introduction?
Sure. My name is Dr. Bethany Johnson. I am a professor at UNC Charlotte. I'm affiliate faculty with the Health and Medical Humanities, and I was one of the 4 hosts to an event where I got to meet you, Nadia, and a number of other people in the community. and we were making zines that discussed the trials, tribulations, and bonuses of perimenopause. And we were doing it through the lens of romance literature. And it was at Divine Barrel Brewing, and our kind of co host sponsor was Trope Bookshop, which is a well known location to Charlotteans, many Charlotteans.
Yeah, thank you for that. And let's backtrack a little bit. What got
Mhm.
you interested in health communication in the first place and exploring different ways to communicate?
That's a great question. I am a medical historian, so I teach about the history of healthcare and medicine in America. And when about 15 years ago, Maggie and I started a project on how infertility patients communicate with their doctors. And we worked with a couple of local practices in Charlotte. And we did that because I was going through treatment at the time and I was having some confusing experiences, but historians don't usually do, we do oral history, we will interview people, but we don't necessarily use those interviews as data and then write up studies on it like qualitative researchers do, at least not in the same way. So Maggie and I worked together. We got what's called an IRB, which is an internal review board application. It just means you can talk to humans and you can do it in a safe and respectful way, let them know what the risks might be. We interviewed 20 people and it was an amazing experience. And from there, we've continued to publish together on reproductive health on social media, different ways to understand embodied experiences. And so turning the lens on perimenopause and menopause definitely just felt like an obvious next step for us.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, I know who Maggie is, but do you want to explain to the people who she is and who the other researchers on the team are?
Yes, thank you for that reminder. They're so like close to me and my brain that like everyone knows. Dr. Margaret Quinlan is in the Comm Studies Department. She also runs the Health and Medical Humanities program at UNC Charlotte. She's a health comm scholar. And then the two other people I'm honored to work with are Dr. Jessamine Moxie. She works in the public health department. And Dr. Erica Montanaro. I was like, oh my goodness, how could I forget her last name? But she's Erica to me. Dr. Erica Montanaro works in the psychology department. And yeah, the four of us linked up over the interest in perimenopause as a community health issue that hasn't gotten enough discussion, we don't think. And also our shared love of romance or romantasy, science fiction, and those types of things. All of us read pretty heavy stuff for work. I would say, um, yeah, if I'm doing like health during reconstruction or something like that, I'm reading really heavy materials that are important and I want to absorb and be able to reteach to my students, but sometimes I need to turn my brain off or put it into a pretend world. And that's where fiction comes in really handy for me.
Yeah, of course. And can you talk a little bit more about the research portion of the perimenopause zines? Like, what's the main thing you're hoping to learn, and are there any early insights?
Yeah, so there are a few things we're hoping to learn. We're hoping to learn one of our kind of framework research questions is this kind of creative outlet. Zines are very short and also small, short in length, but also small in stature, like pamphlets that people make. We are having people work on the 8-page model, and people are using collage methods and or drawing if they want it. And we are also making photography available with miniature Polaroids. And then the final product of that should be an informational piece that shares the person's individual experience and knowledge about perimenopause or things that they learned at the event and how they're sort of reimagining their relationship with their body by using romance scenes and literature to kind of round it out. I was trying to think if I have a copy on hand. I sent them all with Jess because I would have loved to show you here. But one of the primary questions we have is this a way to learn about a medical topic that can feel really unpleasant or kind of like a downer sometimes? It's hard to be like, yes, there are 50 potential symptoms you could experience. They could be not a big deal at all. They could be really interruptive for your life. They could last for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. And we don't have a ton of studies about it because we don't study the health of women and gender nonconforming people in any meaningful way. And we weren't even required to include women in drug trials until 1997. So there's a huge gap in the literature. So, instead of presenting it that way, we were hoping to combine some of that reality with, is this an example for us to see ourselves embodied in the world? Is this a time when we can see ourselves anew as our sexual selves, as our intimate selves? Where's the space for that? And can we do that in this project? So we want to know what people are learning and taking away, what they tend to focus on as individuals. So I'll give a few examples. One of the early insights is that people bring a lot of the emotion of this transition of their life into the project, something that I really love. In the pilot, which was a first gathering that we had with like 13 people, there were about 35 at this event, so there were a lot more. But the first pilot event, I know those zines the best because we've finalized them and digitized them and started studying them. There was one person who just wrote about rage. It was a whole zine on rage, and it was excellent. And it was called We Could Be So Much Worse. And her point was, we're doing pretty well with all these symptoms out here and not like lighting stuff on fire. Good for us. And other people talked about uncertainty, sadness about body changes, excitement about not menstruating as a thing in the future at the end of the process, having like less nervousness and less care about what people thought. So there's a lot of those themes coming up. And then there are also themes about access to information, whether or not people's doctors and other practitioners know about supports during perimenopause, whether or not there's enough research, whether or not the social media is a safe place to get information. These are a lot of the themes that we've seen coming up at the beginning. And we've also had people get really creative, which is also a question we had. Like, would people make something new out of this idea? Would they take it further? Would they branch off? Would they do combinations we haven't expected? And there was one group in the pilot that did a fold out. So there was the 2-page kind of layout, as we called it. And then there was a page inside of that folded further out. And they wrote a whole scene based on the needs of someone in perimenopause and like needing extra lube and stuff like that. And they wrote up this really cool premise and did a whole scene in it. And it was great. And we also had a woman named Vera who writes this type of literature in her own time. And she wrote us a starter scene. So we had that to work with. So it's been really interesting to see what people take away, what they learn, and how they extend and sort of create the idea. That's been fun to see.
Yeah, I definitely really enjoyed the creative part of the workshop. So it's like, it felt like being in my art class again, just doing all these little things. And then also just hearing people talk about their symptoms or experiences with their doctors. I think that was really illuminating for me, especially being on the younger side. Like, this is
Yeah,
not even really on my radar yet.
totally. Do you feel like this will be something that, so one of the reasons we are really excited to hear from some of the younger folks that came out is because no one was preparing my age group for this. Our mothers didn't really talk about it. Our grandmothers certainly didn't talk about it. And so we kind of all just felt like we had no information going into this, even though probably what we know will be so different by the time it's your turn. Do you feel like you have a framework or some grounding, some understanding of what could happen?
Yeah, I know it's just a lot of the hormonal changes is changing how you kind of process stimuli and like temperature regulation, things like that. I know
Yeah.
I kept hearing a lot about like dry and itchy skin. That's something I
Yeah.
remember a lot, but yeah.
Yeah. And it could be so, Nadia, you could have like none of those symptoms and just like not even know. That's what's so interesting about it. Or you could have all of them, or you could have like the itchiness really bad and never have hot flashes, or you could have no itchiness and four other things. Um, Maggie and I have also done a social media study on what people are posting about on menopause or were during a certain period. You always have to kind of limit yourself because material changes so quickly. But in our data set, one of the things we found was that a lot of people had joint pain, particularly in their hips. And that's something that none of us in our group have experienced. And then like frozen shoulder. So people would end up like going to PT or osteopaths or, other practitioners getting MRIs. And it was just frozen shoulder from menopause. Not just because it was interrupting their life, but there wasn't an injury related to it. And so they weren't getting results from having these tools and these examinations and scans and stuff because there wasn't an injury. It was a hormonal issue.
No, yeah. I've been to PT recently for like my wrist just because I'm
Yeah.
like on my computer all the time.
Yeah.
And the doctor had said to me like estrogen like impacts your connective tissue and it's
Mhm.
like this whole thing. So it's really fascinating and also frustrating, just like the lack of knowledge we have. But
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so glad your doctor knew that because, 15 years ago, I don't know if doctors were hearing this at all unless they were looking up studies. Because in the early 2000s, they stopped a study at the NIH and concluded that hormone therapy was unsafe. But there were a few things that happened in that study that we wouldn't do now. First of all of the people were around 65, so they were well past menopause. 90% of people have gone through menopause by like the end of their 51st year. So you had women that were postmenopausal and they were having hormone treatment for the first time, right? So there was no history for it in their system. And then we didn't have bioidentical hormones at the time. So we were using like horse urine extracted hormones, and those show up and act differently in the body. And there was a whole cohort of the group that was only getting estrogen and not estrogen and progesterone together, or estradiol and progesterone. And they saw that it increased the risk of stroke and cardiac events. So they pulled the plug on the study. We would not start hormones for people that are extensively post menopause today. It's most helpful in the perimenopausal period, or at least that's what most of the research is for, and sort of like up to the age of menopause, and maybe slightly beyond it. And also, you have to take estradiol and progesterone together for them to be protective and for them not, and for the risk of clots and similar problems to be mitigated.
for sure. And you talked a little bit about the power of zines at the workshop,
Mm-hmm.
but can you talk more about them as tools for information sharing?
Yes. So, since the 1920s, I talked a little bit about the Harlem Renaissance and how short literature or essays or like information on what artists were producing during the Harlem Renaissance. This was one of the first places zines were created at any scale and distributed. But very quickly, they became sources of medical information. Before Roe and now after Roe, People can give information about abortion access, abortion pill access, scans, and other types of reproductive health care that might be hard for people to access in their area. Also, during the HIV/AIDS pandemic, there was tons of information and lots of zines created about drug trials, where to get testing, what to look for in terms of your own symptoms, how to try to maintain your health through a supportive diet and lifestyle changes, and just any information that people could get out, they were sharing in their community. Also, safe sex practices, that was a big thing in the 80s and 90s. And then today, there has been a lot of really creative stuff that was made during COVID lockdown, and there's a lot of stuff emerging on chronic illness, things like ME/CFS, which used to be called chronic fatigue syndrome, but now has that more formal title. And people who are living with these diseases are making these zines with information about how they live, and what new treatments they're hearing about, what their doctors are saying. So in terms of health communication itself, zines have, at least for the last 40 years, been really great tools of getting information out to people that might not have easy access to healthcare itself, or doctors might be uninsured or might struggle in other ways because of the legal structures in their state.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then, of course, the workshop I went to was not the first one you did. And
Yeah.
then I think you mentioned a pilot workshop. So what have you learned from doing like multiple iterations of this? And what has gone well? What hasn't gone well?
So I think the bigger space, so that was our problem with the pilot. We had it in Trope Bookshop, which was awesome because like the environment was great. The vibes were really good, but it was so tight. People couldn't move around. People couldn't go between tables. We couldn't, do much in the way of like food or drinks. We had a hard time presenting just because it's a small place. And so I think that went better this time. We also changed Katie, who owns Trope Books, and our team had a meeting after the pilot to say like, hey, here's some changes you could make to the presentation. Because what we went into the pilot not really sure what people were going to know about perimenopause. Some people knew a lot. Some people were kind of like hadn't really known anything about it. And so we found, I think, some more effective ways to structure it and explain the connections between zines and perimenopause. Something I think we'd like to tighten even more is to make sure that people know enough about what they're doing to feel like they have some excited creative direction going forward. I think it still feels really new by the time people are starting their zines. I think at the end of the workshop, people are starting to like really get into their groove, really get excited. And I also noticed we also did one at a library in between the pilot and this one. And at that one, we had more of the camera use. And at this one, what was so interesting, I noticed people were using the camera on the Barbie buffet, which is like this big group of Barbies and all different shapes and sizes, skin colors, hair textures, and then all kinds of stuff like props. And we were wondering if people would want to use those items to kind of get their creative side going and take pictures of it. And what I noticed was a lot of people were using the Barbies and setting up scenes and taking pictures and then just keeping the pictures, which I loved because there were no rules about it. But so many people left with Barbie pictures that I was like, maybe we should think about that as like a separate activity. Like also get yourself a Barbie picture and like make a better like space for people to just make a scene that they can take a picture of and take with them. But it was interesting because we live in such a digital world that to see people taking little pictures just delighted me.
Yeah. I know some people at my table had the camera, but I don't think the Polaroids ended up in our zine.
Yeah, I know. And I'm like, well, then you take them, right? Like it's such a good other option. And there's no rules about the zine. You can take pictures and it doesn't have to end up anywhere, right? So I really like that people kind of get right away that you can just change your mind as you go. You can make more than one. You can work collaboratively or by yourself. There's a lot of different ways to approach the project, and there's no wrong answer and there's no wrong result. And what we end up studying are similarities and differences between the final projects. And we can even look at, this set of zines at the pilot, this set of zines at the library, this set of zines at Divine Barrel Brewing, and then see like, were there differences or are there themes emerging at each of these events? Could it be related to the different environments? And how might we use that information to shape another workshop going forward?
Yeah, that's really great. And what would you recommend to people who might be interested in making and distributing zines or otherwise getting information out to their communities?
I love it. Okay, first of all, just make a zine. Make it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry what it looks like. One thing you can Google is how to make a zine, and you'll find tons of YouTube's PDFs you can print out that'll show you how to fold it. You can watch a video that shows you how to fold it so it fits up in one piece. You can map it ahead of time so you can decide, I'm going to put this type of information here, this type of information here, and you can change your mind as you go. You can do more than one copy. The thing that we always tell people to remember is that it shouldn't be perfect. It should look kind of homemade and not super smooth. It could be reproduced quickly and easily on a Xerox machine, like a copy machine. That is how they're supposed to be reproduced. You could just draw them. You don't have to use any kind of collage or other materials. So drawing is totally acceptable. And it's easy to find them online if you want to look. They're sold on Etsy and like eBay of all places, but you can also read through digital copies of them and you can see a lot of artists who have made their own related to certain topics. There's also the digital zine collection at the Wellcome Library. That's Wellcome. If you Google that, you can read a lot of their zines. You can see the layouts and you can see that there are all different kinds. There are books about zines, but it's more about the history of zines and different kinds of zines and things. So you can take a really deep dive or you can just Google it and get yourself a template and get started.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I think you mentioned at the workshop that some of the zines are being archived in the Wellcome Library. Can you talk a little bit more about that process?
We hope. Yeah, we hope. We are working with them right now to see if our collection is a good fit and to make sure that we know all the parameters. So we're currently discussing right now. They have a particular collection of health zines. And so we would like the sort of initial or like first copies. So, excuse me, sorry, my chair is. So the ones that were not printed, right? We brought the printed copies to this to give away to people, and a number of people took one of each, and we have the sort of original ones with all different kinds of paper on them. So I don't know if we're going to give them those or a copy of those because you are supposed to copy it. That is part of the process, that Xerox piece. So yeah, we are still talking with them about it. We would love to have this project archived at the Wellcome. It's one of the most important medical libraries in the world, and we would be super honored. But we haven't gotten a final plan yet. So we're still pursuing that. The reason we talked about it at the event is as a just in case. We wanted people to know so they would have a chance to be like, oh, don't put mine in if you're going to do that. But everybody was happy about it. Also, your names aren't on them, so they're kind of pre-anonymized, and we're not listing ourselves as the authors. We're listed as the authors of the project, and in the project description, we would talk about event attendees having made these, and we would be clear which we made as a group, which we combined, and which individuals made.
Yeah, awesome. And is there anything I didn't ask about that you think is important to mention?
I will just say that in an age of new technological tools like AI and like sort of hyper digitalization, it can be really, as useful as those tools can be, it can feel really grounding and empowering to just make something on paper and turn it into something that you can actually hand to someone. There's something that feels really lost arts about that at this point. And we hear that from a lot of our attendees. So if someone listening to this is like, oh, I wonder if I would like doing that, definitely give it a try. I think you'll be surprised at how fun it is.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Nadia. It was so good to meet you. And I'm really glad we got to talk about this more.
Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I will leave some links in the description so you can learn more about the project and some of the things going on in the Wellcome Library and other resources about zines. And I will see you all next time.